Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity multiplayer tutorial. Today we'll be looking at how to implement matchmaking into your multiplayer game so that players can queue up, be matched against each other, they can also leave the queue if they wish to do so, and then in the next tutorial following this one, we'll be actually spinning up an instance of a server for a match and connecting the players to it via the IP address and port. Hope you're looking forward to it, so let's get started. But just before we get started, I'd like to mention that only 20% of the people who are watching are actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want a quick and easy way to help support us for free, head down below, hit the subscribe button and enjoy the video. So here we are inside of Unity, and as always, if you want access to the project, the link is down below to the GitHub. And all we have here is what we had last time, except I've made a new game object called the Matchmaker. So let's turn off this login screen, and you'll see Matchmaker is just some UI with a play button, and then what is disabled here is the leave button and the status text, which is behind the play button. If I was to type some stuff, you'd see it here. And so what happens is we'll hit play to join the queue, and then it will disable the play button. We'll get some text here telling us if we're in queue, if we found a match, that kind of stuff, and then we can always leave if we'd like to. And that's all the setup we need, just a button to play, a button to leave, and some text to display the current status. So I'm going to hit undo a few times and go back to what I originally had. So let's head over to the PlayFab dashboard to set up matchmaking. So we'll go over to multiplayer, and then we'll go to the matchmaking tab. And this is where we set up our queues, and queues are like quick play, ranked, and all these other game modes you might have. And for us, we just have one queue. So I'm going to make a new queue, and I'll call it default queue for the sake of this. Then the match size is how many players in a match. In our case, it's Pong, it's 1 versus 1, so it's a min and max of 2 players total. The ticket size is how many players are allowed in a single ticket, and a ticket is what you submit when you join the queue. So in our case, we're joining on our own, it's 1 versus 1. We don't care about statistics right now, or server allocation, we'll cover that in next week's tutorial. Teams, we're not having teams. And for rules, this is if you wanted to add skill-based matchmaking, region-based matchmaking, all those kind of things. But that's getting a bit too advanced for right now. Let's just set up a simple matchmaking queue. Once you're done, we'll head to the bottom and we'll create this queue. Now that that's done, we'll head back into Unity and let's head over to the PlayFab login scripts that we made previously. Currently, we store the session ticket, which we tell the server when we connect so that it can validate our player. But we also need to store one extra thing, which is going to be used for joining the matchmaking queue. So we want to add another thing, which is public static string, and this will be our entity ID. And just like we do down here, how we store the session ticket, we also want to store the entity ID, which is equal to result.entityToken.entity.id. And we also want to add this line not just when we're creating a new account and logging in, but also when we're just signing in like normal. So if we put this in, we can now read our entity ID as well as our session ticket. And like I said, this entity ID is what we send to PlayFab when we're trying to join a queue. So back into Unity, if we look at the matchmaker, you'll see here we have a matchmaker script on it. So we want a script for this, and all I've got in it so far are the 3 fields here for hooking up the play, leave, and then the queue status text. And we can start actually writing the logic now. So let's make a method that's called when the player hits the play button. So I'll make a public void, and we'll call it start matchmaking. And when the player starts matchmaking, we want to disable the play button. So play button.setActive false. And then we also want to set the queue status text to be something like submitting ticket. And then we also want to turn the text on because it's currently disabled. So game object .setActive true. So now we need to call the PlayFab multiplayer API to then tell it to put us in queue and do other various things. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated. And I'm not going to go very, very slow here because this video would take forever. It's quite a lot of code we've got to get through here. So if you do want access to it, like I said, GitHub link is down below, or you can slow down and pause the video. So I'm going to speed through this a little bit, but I will be explaining as I'm going along. So we need to call in the PlayFab multiplayer API. They have a method or an endpoint on the API called createMatchmakingTicket. There, we need to make a request. And in that request, we need to pass in a creator. So creator equals new matchmaking player. Let's just put this onto a new line. like so. And then this player, open that up, then has an entity, and then that equals a new entity key, open that up. And this is where we actually pass in the ID. So the ID is equal to what we had in the other script, our playfab login.entityID. And we also need to tell it what type this is, because they have different types. So type equals title underscore player underscore account. We're saying this ID is for a player account for this title. And then we also need to pass through the data to do with our matchmaking, which might be our skill or our region or whatever data you want to pass through. And we don't have any data, but we still have to fill it in. So attributes equals new, and let IntelliSense carry you forwards here. Speeds up things quite a bit. The data object is a new empty object, because we're not passing through any data here. We don't have anything to say. You then, down here, want to pass through how long until the player just gets kicked from the queue because it's taking too long. So we can give up after however many seconds you want, let's say 120, after 2 minutes. And then the queue name is what we had on the dashboard, which in our case is default queue. But we'll be writing default queue quite a few times, so let's make this string into a const so we don't have to keep typing it out. So private const string queue name equals default queue, like so. And then we'll pass it in down here. So that's the queue name. And then with the API, we have callbacks here for what happens when it's successful and when it fails. So let's make a private void on matchmaking ticket created. And that gives us back a create matchmaking ticket result. We'll call that result. And when there's an error, we'll call this private void on matchmaking error. And that takes in a playfab error. And we just want to log it to the console. So debug.log error, error.generate error report. That will give us a human readable string so we can figure out what's gone wrong. And all we need to do now is just pass those in to that method. So when we say create a ticket, we then also say when it's successful, call on matchmaking ticket created. When it's not successful, call on matchmaking error. Now when it is successful, we want to store the ticket ID. So let's up at the top, make a private, and we want to make a string for this. So private string ticket ID, and then we want to set that down here. So in the callback that we made, we want to say ticket ID is equal to result.ticket ID. We then also want to take the leave queue button and turn it on, because at this point you are allowed to leave queue now. And then the queue status text.text is equal to ticket created. So at this point we can see that the ticket has been created. And we now want to, while they're in queue, keep updating the UI to tell them that they're in queue until they're finally matched. And you can only do this 10 times in a minute, meaning that you need to wait 6 seconds between each time you check. So down here we'll make a coroutine. It's private IEnumerator. We'll call this poll ticket so we can keep polling it, and it takes in the ticket ID. And we want it to keep going on, so we'll say while true, which is an infinite loop, but we will break out of it. So say while true, playfab multiplayer API dot get matchmaking ticket, and then this takes a get matchmaking ticket request. We need to tell it which ticket we want to get. So ticket ID equals the ticket ID we've got stored. The queue name is the queue name we've got stored. So queue name. And then here we need a callback for when it's successful and when it fails. So we'll make another method, private void, and you get the pattern here. So it's private void on get matchmaking ticket. I'll make this matchmaking be a lower m, and then this gets a matchmaking ticket result. And we can pass that in. So we say when we do successfully get a ticket, we call this, and when we fail, we'll just call the on matchmaking error we made earlier, put a semicolon there, and it's telling you here that the error is that there's no comma. So keep in mind, this will happen forever. It will just keep calling this. So we need to say, after we've actually called the API, to yield return new wait for seconds, 6, because it's 6 seconds every time you want to call it. But you also need a way to stop this coroutine, because this will go on forever. So what we can do is, at the top, we can make a private, let's do it here, private coroutine, poll ticket coroutine. And when we actually start it, so we want to start it here. As soon as we make our ticket, we then want to start doing this. So we can say poll ticket coroutine equals start coroutine poll ticket, and we'll pass in the result.ticket ID. And to be honest, we don't even need to do that anymore because we already have it stored as a private field, so we could just access it in here anyway. So we can say here ticket ID, but get rid of this being passed in, and it will still work because we've got the field up at the top. And then wherever we call poll ticket, we don't actually need to pass that in anymore. Now if we scroll down, remember this onGetMatchmaking ticket will be called every 6 seconds when we're asking, are we ready yet? Have we been matched? Have we been matched? So what we can do here is we can say, let's update the queueStatus text every time to say status, and then the result.status. You see here, status can be, if we look here, waiting for players, waiting for match, waiting for server, cancelled, or matched. So then we can say, we'll do a switch here on the status, and we'll say, in the case that it is matched, we want to do this. And we also want to add the ability to cancel queue. So we'll also say case cancelled. So in the case that we are successfully matched, we then want to stop the coroutine for polling the ticket. We won't do it anymore. And we want to make a separate method for start match. And we need to pass in the match ID, result.match ID. So I'm going to go down here and make this method. So private void start match, taking in a string for the match ID. And with a match ID, you can ask PlayFab who the other players are in your game, for example. So what we can do here is we can say queueStatusText.text equals, and then starting match. And we can ask PlayFab API, PlayFab multiplayer API, get us a match. And to get a match, you then need to pass in a match request where the match ID equals the match ID we were told. The queue name we've got stored is the same queue name. And then we just say simply what happens when we get the match, so on get match, and what happens when we fail, on matchmaking error. And the final method down here is private void on get match, which has a get match result. You can see some consistency here. Every single call has an error and a successful callback, and the callback will have a result with the data from that. So with this data, we can say queueStatusText.text equals, and what we can do is we can just say the ID of the two players. So we can say result.members0.entity.id versus result.members1.entity.id. Like that, we'll update the UI. So let's have a look over the code we've written. So the first thing we do is we simply make the ticket, and then when that's successful, so when the ticket is in queue, we'll then keep checking from this coroutine every 6 seconds what the status is. So we'll try and get it, wait 6 seconds, try and get it, wait 6 seconds. And every 6 seconds we'll read the status. We'll say if the status is now matched, we will then stop polling and we will start the match. And in our case, starting the match means get us the data for this match. And when we get the data, we will then update the queueStatus text to say player 1 versus player 2, whoever those players are. And this is the foundation for the next tutorial, where we'll actually then send those players the IP addresses of the server, because there's currently no server for the game. We actually need PlayFab to spin up a new instance of the server, and then the players can connect to it and play their game. Let's head into Unity now that we've got that script written. I know it was quite complex, We will add leaving queue in a future tutorial too, but it's a bit too much to put into one tutorial. So if we go over to the play button, scroll down, make sure that that play button is hooked into matchmaker start matchmaking. And currently the leave queue button is empty. There's nothing for it to actually call. And then the text is here. It's all set up. Everything is plugged in on the matchmaker script. So we should be able to hit play and put ourselves in queue. So if I was to search here, Dapper Dino, and put in the password ABC123, sign in, hit play, submitting, created, waiting for match. So it's actually put me in queue. Obviously leave doesn't work right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and we'll do a build and see what happens when we get 2 players joining queue. So now that I've got a build, I'll log in. So Dapper Dino, ABC123, and not Nathan, ABC123, sign in, and I'll join queue. Waiting for match, join queue, waiting for match, and if we just sit here and wait, this person is now matched, and that person is now matched as well. And we also have the IDs, which you can then do API calls to PlayFab to say, get me the name of this player, or whatever else you need to do with that. But the point is, it has worked. Both players know who they're up against, so we can then, in the next tutorial, actually put them against each other in a match. So yeah, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, then please leave a like and subscribe. Let us know down below what you want to see next. I know this is more of an advanced tutorial than usual, so I'm sorry if any of you got lost. It is quite complicated. Like I said, link down below if you want to get access to the code and look through it at a slower pace, or if you want to slow me down on the video to understand the explanations a bit more. I'll also link the API and all the documentation in the description in case you want to go look through that yourself. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. But of course, before I go, I've got to thank my patrons. A special thanks to Francisco Lira, Liz Kimber, Andrew Williams, Beardodeye, Chris Diplek, Dario Alvarez, David McDermott, Jake Nixon, Yoris Letter, Joseph Murphy, Casey, Katinkamom, Mike Troop, Sam Marcus, Malvin, and Rack. If anyone else is able to help support the channel monetarily, a link to my Patreon is down below. If not, there are also links down below to other social media, such as Twitch, Twitter, and Discord. You can help us out by following on any of those. That would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.